I would now like to introduce the next speaker, an outstanding military officer with a distinguished career in the Sri Lanka Army. He is Major General Kamal Gunarathne. He was enlisted to the Sri Lanka Army in 1981, and commissioned as a second lieutenant in 1982. Having attended several local courses and also courses conducted in foreign countries, most notably among them was the Command and Staff course in the Staff College of Pakistan and the National Defence College course in the National Defence College of India. And he has held several staff positions and instructor appointments, and the most notable in terms of his sacrifice to protect the sovereignty of this country. He was the General Officer commanding 55 Infantry Division from 2006 to 2008, General Officer commanding 53 Division 2008 to 2009, and Colonel of the Regiment of Gajaba Regiment from 2008 to 2009, and later Commander Security Forces WANNI from July 2009 to December 2010. He had held several government positions, the Coordinating Officer of Puttlam District Tsunami Relief Operations and Competent Authority for Internally Displaced Persons in the Northern Province. He also had got a lot of awards: Ranavikrama Padakkama, Ranasura Padakkama, Deshaputra Padakkama, and Uttama Seva Padakkama. I would now request Major General Kamal Gunarathne to make his address.
Honorable Minister of External Affairs, Professor G.L. Piris, Secretary to the Ministry of Defence, Mr. Gotabaya Rajapaksa, Honorable Parliamentarians, Dr. Subramaniam Sami, past commanders, Chief of Defence Staff and Service Commanders, Excellencies and distinguished guests, good afternoon. The sequence of my presentation will be as shown on the screen. Nation states, including world superpowers, have taken different approaches to counter insurgencies within and outside their countries. In spite of manpower, material superiority, advanced technology and long-term commitment, most of these approaches have not achieved tangible gains. At a time when global security is being threatened by various forms of terrorism, Sri Lanka has proved its formula of eradicating terrorism, innovating and introducing new concepts for countering insurgencies. Nearly 3 decades of internal conflict that engulfed Sri Lanka ended decisively with the security forces defeating the terrorism and reducing the LTTE down to an ideology in May 2009. VAVUNIYA was the launching pad of the WANNI humanitarian operation, and Security Forces Headquarters WANNI played the pivotal role in operational and administrational aspects. Ladies and gentlemen, the area of responsibility of WANNI during the humanitarian operation is as shown on the screen. Towards the end of the conflict, LTT forced the entire civilian population to go together with their cadres and held civilians as hostages to prevent the security forces defeating them. These civilians were used as a human shield too to launch attacks against the security forces. Civilians withdrew from their lands, leaving the properties and generation-long harvested wealth behind due to the fear of death. They carried the bare minimum for survival, and out of which are the most precious. Even they carried roofs of their houses to find shelter elsewhere, which had become a dream during their deadliest march. Evacuation attempts of these civilians with the negotiations by INGOs such as UN, ICRC, SLMM, and many other NGOs and religious organizations did not materialize due to LTT's objections. However, at every given opportunity, civilians were encouraged by the troops to escape from the clutches of the LTTE and enter to the security forces' controlled area. With the progress of the security forces, thousands of affected civilians started fleeing to seek refuge under the government. Frontline troops were instructed to receive these civilians with utmost care and to provide them with essential needs. It was assessed that the damage and destruction done by the LTE to the properties of the civilians and to the infrastructure were colossal. Areas liberated were highly contaminated with mines. Civilians were with the post-war trauma. The situation was not conducive for immediate resettlement. Hence, as per the action plan made by the government, forecasting the requirement, initially they were transferred to the transit camps located within the vicinity of WANNI, and concurrently they were transferred to well-organized Manik Farm relief villages. Taking care of such a large number of IDPs was obviously a daunting task. The government once again heavily relied upon the security forces. His Excellency the President immediately appointed the competent authority for IDPs in the northern province, a 2-star general, to take care of all activities related to IDPs and house them properly. His endeavor was guided by the Presidential Task Force headed by a senior minister. I was honored to be the successor for firstly appointed competent authority. Initially, we faced many challenges and many administrative nightmares. However, we managed to overcome all these challenges with the sheer commitment of our troops, with the proper guidance given by the government, NGOs, and INGOs. To enhance the infrastructure facilities already provided by the government at Manik Farm, UN agencies and other NGOs were grouped into 3 clusters according to the UN system of operating, namely food cluster, shelter cluster, and wash cluster, to facilitate the requirement. Under these clusters, the agencies did a commendable task. It was obvious that without their assistance, this would be another terrifying experience to the government. Ladies and gentlemen, 3 clusters are as shown on the screen. Food cluster, shelter cluster, and wash cluster, the combination of government, NGOs, and INGOs. Manik Farm was visited by over 150 delegations, including UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon. While welfare facilities like cooperatives, banks, post office, and schools, etc., were prepared at Manik Farm, government extended an invitation to Professor Walter Kalin, UN Special Representative for the Rights of the IDPs, to visit. His report was extremely constructive and highly commended the effort taken by the government and other agencies to make the IDPs comfortable. During the visit of UN Secretary General, he was pleased to see the facilities provided for IDPs. By doing all possible to create the situation for IDPs happy living, we should not forget the role played by the Sinhalese people in South. They were all alarmed with the needs of these fellow citizens of the country and volunteered to help in full swing. They were encouraged by the patriotism and lent their hands with fatherly and brotherly feeling. The mammoth task of reconstruction and resettlement, with the directions of the Presidential Task Force, and with the help of government authorities, became the prime responsibility of the competent authority. Hence, it is important to confirm the definitions by virtue of understanding. Moreover, the point to consider is reconstruction and resettlement cannot be achieved without stabilization. Ladies and gentlemen, the definitions of reconstruction, stabilization, and resettlement are as shown on the screen. Now let's get on to the reconstruction in WANNI. Mainly there are 5 sectors as components of an integrated approach to stability and reconstruction. Government has an important role in each of these sectors, so attention to restoring, rebuilding and reforming the public sector in post-conflict societies is critical to achieving the end state conditions of reconstruction. Let us examine the areas that were crucial for the reconstruction. No one looking to the village, state or nation willingly wants to be victimized by crime or to live in a society without laws, freedom, a chance to prosper or access to decent schools, well-run hospitals and carefully maintained roads. The security forces in WANNI realized that without security and law and order, the other government functions cannot be fulfilled. Therefore, the stabilization operations conducted by the security forces in WANNI focused mainly on disarmament, demobilization and reintegration, engaged in a combination of rebuilding, professionalizing and reforming the government infrastructure with their civilian partners. After the defeat of the LTTE, hopes of the people of WANNI skyrocketed for a safe and secure environment. The security forces identified the risk areas, low risk areas and no risk areas, and divided the areas of responsibility of each security forces headquarters into sectors, and the authority was further delegated to respective division commanders and so on down to battalion level. With the help of intelligence services, security forces identified the LTT cadres who were disguised among the IDPs and took them in for rehabilitation, so that the innocent IDPs had no trouble in starting their lost lives. The security forces recovered huge caches of arms hidden by terrorists, which were very potent, lethal and capable of causing lots of damage to the life and property, thus created an arms-free environment for the IDPs to come and resettle and to live in peace. The preliminary condition of good governance is the establishment of the rule of law. In order to enforce the rule of law, the areas were selected and police stations were established. WANNI people who were deprived of the services of the legitimate police force welcomed this move and started developing trust towards the law enforcing authorities. Social well-being is an end state in which basic human needs are met and people are able to coexist peacefully in communities with opportunities for advancement. This end state is characterized by equal access to and delivery of basic needs, services, the provision of primary and secondary education, the return or resettlement of those displaced by violent conflict, and the restoration of social fabric and community life. Without basic necessities such as food or shelter, large-scale social instability will persist because people will be unable to resume the functions of normal life, sustaining a livelihood, traveling safely, engaging in community activities,